Dr. El-Erian, can you please explain Dooley, Garber, Folkerts-Landau, 14 years ago, the revised Bretton Woods system? Are we at a point, a nexus, Dr. El-Erian, where Dooley, Garber, and Folkerts-Landau were right that we need a whole new international financial system?
Well, you have David on set. He can speak to that better. They were right. They had an early insight, and a really important insight, that the system itself wouldn't function like it did before, and that you needed to think much deeper about the setup of the global system. And they have been proven right over and over again, including in the difficulty that we have today in generating growth and the difficulty in getting an exchange rate configuration that everybody can live with.
This is so important, Dr. Folkerts-Landau. The basic idea of your work is about the flows of money. What do you see of yen? What do you see of renminbi, the dollar, and of course an interesting euro? What is the distinctive point right now within our international currency architecture?
Thank you, Tom. Mohammed, good to see you again. I think that there's sort of two levels you look at exchange rate. One of them is in a systemic level, right? As to who fixes to the dollar and who goes up and down with that, and then who has a floating exchange rate. And our view always was and has been that we had a de facto dollar block in Asia. That is less true now as flexibility has been restored, as we had predicted. And rightly so, because the Chinese economy is now sufficiently large and sufficiently sophisticated to deal with more flexibility in the exchange market. But it was all about the systemic part. In fact, I would just echo what Mohammed said before. We have, when you look at economics as a whole, we really don't know very well how the basic things that we thought we understood still work. What we still sort of do know, however, is the broader systemic issues. There, I think we still have some knowledge. But in terms of day-to-day or week-to-week or month-to-month exchange rate movements and flows and what the exchange rate reacts to, so I think we're very much at sea. And I was very pleased to hear that Mohammed started out his conversation that how much we have to learn and rethink what we once knew.
Yeah, and actually, Mohammed, on that point, are we now, because some of the movements on the markets have been unexplained, or at least the correlations haven't been working anymore, what do we understand about how Chinese FX policy plays into, for example, dollar, euro, but also bond yields?
You know, that's a great question. And Chinese FX management has evolved a great deal. And I think there's now greater attention being paid to the systemic implication. The basic problem, Francine, is what I call the hot potato syndrome. No one wants to live with an appreciated exchange rate. The growth dynamics aren't strong enough to compensate for the loss of competitiveness. So what the FX market is trying to figure out is who, for the time being, is ready to live with a strong currency. And that view shifts. And I think everybody has been surprised recently at what has moved the move in the dollar. Well, you shouldn't be, because there's a limit to how strong the euro can get. So I think that's a really important issue. Think of it as a hot potato. No one wants a strong currency in this environment.
David?
I think with regard to the Chinese, one thing is very important to understand is that for them, stability is really everything. They made a mistake in letting the exchange rate quasi-float, causing volatility. But once that was corrected, my sense is that above everything, they do not want to disturb the system, and they will intervene sufficiently. And they do have the powers, the administrative powers, to intervene in markets to keep, through restrictions on capital flows and what companies and banks do, to keep that market and the exchange rate fairly stable, reasonably stable. So I don't think the RMB is going to be a source of disturbance for the rest of us. But
was it out of the way that they actually handled it, David, or was it almost like, I mean, if you look at, dollar weakness also helped them with the reserves, it almost seems that, the stars were aligned from the beginning of the year of how to stabilize this.
Well, our former chief economist in Asia has now become one of the deputy governors, and when chatting with him about this, I get the impression that they really had to learn. They really didn't know what to expect. Expectations were wrong, and they had to learn how to do this. But they have learned, and I think they can do that now. With regard to dollar-euro, I agree with Mohammed. I think that it has been a very fast, very steep decline And it is difficult to see how it is warranted in light of U.S. economic performance and in light of the divergent rates performance. So my sense would be that we would see a retrenchment there.
Dr. El-Erian, one final question. What do you need to see from Madame Lagarde at the IMF meetings? What needs to be her driving thrust, her driving message on this world economic disorder?
I think to continue to stress that global growth is a shared responsibility and that we need a step up in global policy coordination. David just said something very important, which is that certain countries learn from their mistakes, and China has been a typical example of that. To the extent they make mistakes, they learn very quickly and they adapt. But the system as a whole hasn't learned from its mistakes as yet. And I think that the managing director, Christine Lagarde, can advance at least a discussion on this, if not the understanding of this.